Food Safety First with your host, Ryan Ramdass.
Welcome to another episode of Food Safety First, the podcast where we prioritize your well-being by delving into the crucial aspects of food safety. I'm your host, Ryan Ramdass, and today we're shining a spotlight on the topic that affects us all, metal contamination in our food supply. From manufacturing to the dining table, understanding the potential risks is essential. Joining us today is Jake Murray, Regional Sales Manager of Fortress Technology. We will dive in with his expert opinion today. Welcome to the show, Jake. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
No, not a problem. Now, how about you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been in the food inspection industry for nearly the last decade. Started on the production manufacturing side and transitioned into servicing the equipment, which led me to travel all over North America, visiting multiple sites for multiple customers, and even traveling to other parts of the world.
Excellent. So you've been around the food supply industry. I guess jumping right into our topic, what are some of the common sources of metal contamination that you're seeing, and I guess how does it occur?
Well, it can happen at any part of the stage. So when you're looking at how products are produced, it can start right at the farming side. Metal contamination can enter from your farming, transportation, after farming, and then right into your processing, production, and even packaging. Any one of these processes that has any sort of metal tool or machinery that's used to handle the food can potentially leave a shard of piece of metal contamination into the product.
Interesting. So, how do the different stages in food production, processing, and packaging contribute to the metal contamination risks?
Well, each stage has its own risks and factors. You can consider processing equipment like grinders and slicers have the potential to shred tiny bits of metal into the product. Screens, primarily used in the flour and grain industry, can deteriorate over time. These screens are constantly changed in and out to prevent that purpose, but there is the potential for these pieces to enter the production process. Packing machinery, examples like cutting blades, sealing parts, these blades have the potential to snap at any point in time and enter the product. And I don't know about you, but I don't want blades in my food.
Oh, no, that's pretty concerning. Are there any specific types of metals that pose a higher risk in terms of health concerns when present in our food?
Well, there's preventative measures in place like metal detectors or x-rays. These are to protect us, the consumer. As for specific types of metal, all of these pose a risk. Whether that be cutting, slicing your tongue, chipping a tooth, choking if ingested.
Interesting. Now, diving into the prevention of this matter, what measures can be taken during food processing and packaging to minimize the risk of contamination?
Well, to minimize the risk of contamination, I always like to say the more the merrier. Having inspection systems placed not only at the end of the line, but at the beginning or strategically throughout the production process, you can eliminate these factors from entering the line early on. For example, I'll use farming in more depth here. When I'm talking about growing a vegetable crop, these products are extracted from the ground using harvesters or diggers, which can lead to a potential metal source early on. Now, if that is transferred through transportation into production, you now have already contaminated your product prior to entering the packaging stage. So, as a good prevention method is to check it upon receiving product. This not only protects your equipment that you have, but also eliminates the source from potentially getting sliced up even more. Now, if you look at an onion, the potential when you get it at a grocery store, it's diced. So if I have a piece of metal that's entered early on and then it gets diced up into all these smaller contaminants, it's very difficult to check, but when it's on the early side of the product, the whole onion, it's way easier to detect.
So, are there any certain products that are more difficult to inspect for metal contamination?
I'll use metal detectors for an example. They have two states, wet and dry. Now, if you look at a product like your bread loaves, as it comes out of the oven, it's in a wet state. This is due to all the moisture content in the product, and that then has a different effect on the way a metal detector would react to the product. Now, if this product was frozen, fully frozen, you would have a way better chance at detecting a smaller piece of metal due to the fact that there is no moisture content in the product. Again, this refers to wet versus dry. Wet is more conductive and harder to detect versus dry.
So we discussed metal contamination, but how common are metal contamination recalls?
Well, Ryan, with all the technology available today and preventative measures put into place, uh, the chances are relatively infrequent, but they're not unheard of.
Now, you mentioned regulations and standards. I was wondering, can you walk us through the existing regulations and standards in place to ensure food safety relating to metal contamination?
Well, that's a good one. Food safety regulations and standards will vary by the country. In the US, they use regulatory agencies like the FDA or the Food Safety Modernization Act, and global standards such as SQF and BRC.
So, do you know if there are any recent developments or changes in our regulations that our listeners should be aware of?
The best way to stay informed is to visit the websites of these regulatory agencies for updates and changes.
Thank you, Jake. This was very informative. Thank you for shedding light on the potential risks associated with metal contamination in our food.
Anytime.
I think as consumers, understanding these risks really empower us to make informed choices. And thank you, listeners. This wraps up today's episode of Food Safety First. Remember, your health is paramount, so stay tuned for more insights in keeping your food safe. Until next time, I'm your host, Ryan Ramdass.